For those persons who haven't yet done so, we're asking you to clearly identify yourself as requested by Karen. Now, this is actually the second session in the series relating to the reporting forms. The third and final webinar in this series will be held in October 2024, and you will be advised of a date for this session in short order. We haven't yet finalized the date, but as soon as we do, we'll give you adequate notice. In the first webinar held on August 29, 2024, we discussed the reporting and disclosure requirements, including timelines for submitting the reports and the importance of these reports. We provided a general overview of the compliance report, that's a Form 12, and the Annual Information Return, AIR, referred to that as Form 13. And we went to the Form 12, we look at the structure, key elements, and how to complete the form, etc. For this session, the focus will be on the AIR. And like we did with the compliance report, we will do what we call a walkthrough of the form. Right? The final webinar in the series, to be held in October, we'll deal exclusively with the annual report, which is a Form 14. Now, it was a deliberate decision to focus on one of the reporting forms in each session, as we didn't want to overload you with information, given that quite a few of our licensees were not previously exposed to regulatory reporting of this magnitude. So we decided to take it easy, and we didn't want information overload per se. So today's session is scheduled for 2 hours, but we don't anticipate that we will need so much time, but we'll see. The session for the first webinar was recorded and uploaded to the FSC's website. So when you go to the FSC's website, www.fscjamaica.org, you should click on the tab labeled Media, and that is on the top of the website, and select Videos. It is the first video on this page. We will also post a link to the video in the chat. And today's session will also be recorded for your convenience. Before we delve into today's main topic, the Form 12, there are 3 matters that I want to address. 1, commencement of reporting. As per item 1 of our letter dated July 16, 2024, it was indicated that you should commence filing of the Forms 12 and 13, that is the compliance report and the annual information return, by September 30, 2024. We recognize that this caused some confusion, so let me just use this opportunity to clarify that these reports relate to the calendar year ending December 31, 2023. Remember, the ARR and the compliance report are due 3 months after the calendar year end, right? So in an ideal world, the 2023 report should have been due for submission by March 31, 2024, but we know that the forms weren't ready and so on. So we had indicated September 30th, but we are now extending that date for submission to November 30th, 2024. Again, we recognize that the forms are new, and so we thought it only fair that we extend the time. And of course, if you have the difficulty and the challenges when completing the form, you could call the FSC, contact us, Karen Shaw Brown, Sean Liu, and myself. And for the Form 13, there is a guide to completing the form, and Form 14 as well, which we'll do in October. So we have prepared a guide to complete the Form 13 and Form 14. No, we didn't think it necessary to do a guide to complete the Form 12, the compliance report, because it's pretty much straightforward, right? That's the first thing. The second thing that I want to bring to your attention is the major business activity form, Form 18. So basically, this form requests the significant activities that you undertake in providing each service. So let us say that one of the services that you provide is a company formation. We want you to tell us the main activities involved, not all the activities. And we don't want an epistle. It's a very brief description of what that is. Of course, all activities are important. We know that all activities are important, but we just want you to tell us about the very significant ones in your one. So it's up to you to give us that, right? In the last webinar, we indicated that we will be sending out the form, which we did. So the form was dispatched, and we asked that you complete the form and return to us by October 11, 2024. Please note that the Excel version of the form is to be emailed to rcts@fecjamaica.org and records@fecjamaica.org as well. The signed physical copy of the form is to be sent to the FSC's office. All the necessary instructions are included in the email attaching the form and the form itself. But if you require further information, please reach out to the RCTS team. Now, I just want to make a general comment about, when you look at the form, it looks daunting, because some people, this is a long form and it's daunting. When you actually start going through it, you realize it's not as daunting. It's a generic form, so meaning that some of the things may not be applicable to you. So for example, if you don't provide trust services, the form also activities relating to trust, provision of trust services. If you don't provide that services, it's not applicable. You see, but not applicable in that section. But we just design the form, one form, and what's applicable to you, you complete, right? So just bear that in mind. And finally, the RCTS team, that is the Registration Corporate and Trust Services Division, we call it the RCTS for short, will be engaging every licensee to get a better understanding of its TCSP activities. Over time, of course, because we can't do everybody one time. So this may involve visiting your place of business, what we call on-site examination. As mentioned in the last webinar, the FSC uses a combination of on-site and off-site examination activities in carrying out its monitoring and supervisory functions of the TCSP industry. What we mean by off-site? So the reports that you are going to start filing, we'll review those and what we call desk reviews. We might have other information and so on. So that's what we use. And they'll call offset examination. But sometimes we may do on-site examination. Routine, sometimes it's routine. Sometimes there are certain triggers. For example, if the FSC keep getting complaints about your operations, particularly as it relates to a particular service or something, or then we may want to come in and have a look, right? So there are various triggers. So that's what we call that's on-site examinations. Now, what we have started to do in recent times, especially since COVID, we try to limit the time that we spend at your place physically. You have other things to do, and we know sometimes space is a constraint, right? And we have technology. So that even though we call it on-site examination, we may not physically come to your office. We may have discussions over the phone, or via some meeting virtual platform like we're having now, right? So the FSC would have received some information about your operations during the licensing and registration phase, the business plan that you submitted, the application form itself, and other documents that you would have submitted to us, right? However, a key component in the risk-based approach to supervision, which FSC has implemented, is the concept of what we call the knowledge of business. So basically, we have to, for this risk-based approach to work effectively, we have to have sufficient knowledge of your operation. We recognize that we'll never know your operation like you do know your operation, right? And even though you may have similar structure, you may provide similar products or services, each operation is different, right? So we take that into consideration. So, the purpose of this on-site examination is for the FSC to close the knowledge gap. And typically, how it works, the FSC will request certain information and documents for review. We might have discussions, as I said, either online or face-to-face to seek clarity or explanations where necessary. This process has commenced actually, and we have visited some licensees since the start of the year already. And over time, we have to cover everybody. And so you can look out for the correspondence from us as to when you're scheduled. We'll give you adequate notice again. Typically, if we've not come into your office, not for more than a day, possibly two, because we have to understand. So for example, some persons have very sophisticated systems, IT systems, and so it's important for us as regulators, supervisors of the industry, to understand how it works and so on, right? So we will be scheduling. So look out for that. Now let us move into the main focus of today's presentation. Oh, before I do, let me just tell you that if you have any questions or any clarifications, so during this webinar, you may just utilize the chat feature, put the questions in the chat, and we'll answer them, right? At this time, we're moving to the main focus of today's presentation, the AIR, and today's facilitators, Mr. Sean Liu. Sean is an analyst in the RCTS division and has previously worked as an analyst in the pensions division and the insurance divisions of the FSC. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Sean to take you through Form 13. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Philip, and welcome again, everyone. So I will, as Philip has mentioned, I'll be going through the Form 13, otherwise known as the Annual Information Return, otherwise will be addressed as the AIR or AIR. So here we go. Can I get confirmation that you are seeing my screen presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So the outline of this presentation will simply to have an overview of the AIR. We'll also be doing a walkthrough of the AIR, otherwise known as Form 13, and then we'll have a questions and answer session. So as Philip had already mentioned, the form is posted on the FSC website. Inside the form, it also contains explanations and instructions for completing the form. As usual, complete and accurate information must be reported. Providing false or misleading information is an offense under Section 26 of the Trust and Corporate Services Act. Again, as Mr. Chin said mentioned, there's a guide to completing Form 13 on the website. It's the same location where you can find the form as well. He also mentioned that signed submissions are to be made by registered mail or hand delivered to the offices of the FSC located at 39 to 43 Barbados Avenue, Kingston 5. Again, the Excel document should be emailed to both the following email addresses: records@fscjamaica.org and rcts@fscjamaica.org. So Form 13, the AIR, it must be signed by the principal representative of the licensees. Of course, the report solicits information on whether you have conducted your TCSP business in conformity with the legislation, good governance, and best practices. Submission of the Form 13, as mentioned before, should be made within 3 months at the end of each calendar year, in accordance to Regulation 14 of the TCSP regulations. And the form captures qualitative and quantitative information about the TCSP's business. Themes and topics that are captured and covered by the Form 13. It will capture information about your customers, existing and new customers. New meaning any customers that would have enrolled during the reporting period. It will capture information of geographical location of your customers. It also captures or requests information about the services and products and revenue earned from said TCSP services and products. We also capture information about your trust and director, secretaryship, and partnership with the licensee. In other words, the management of the licensee. We also capture information of your governance matters. Examples of this are your risk management, your AML programs, the senior management and board meetings. We also capture information about your complaints mechanism, capture information of your professional indemnity insurance, otherwise known as the PII, your record management and maintenance of registers, and any outsourcing arrangements or functions, where applicable, of course. You'll hear me sort of reiterate these themes and topics as I'm going through the form, so just a heads up. And now go through the walkthrough. Sure. What are you currently seeing on your screen? Still on that.
And get information returned from 13 walkthrough.
Thank you. Switch. All right. So this, in case anybody hadn't looked at the form yet, so this is the Form 13. There are 12 sheets included in this form that also has a cover page. The form does have drop-down boxes for quite a number of the questions, not all. Some will require some written responses. And the purpose of this walkthrough would be to highlight certain sections of the form. So in other words, I'm not going to go through every single thing that is included in this form. As mentioned before, there is also a guide into completing the form. So you use the information that you acquire from this session along with the guide in order to help you to complete the Form 13. The first few sheets of this form are intended to garner specifics from the TCSPs regarding your client shareholdings and jurisdictions. And as Philip had mentioned before, there's going to be a sheet in this form that will require you to provide relevant supporting documents, and you should compile an appendix with all the supporting documents and submit it along with the report. You'll know which sheet that is later down. So the cover page, just capturing basic contact details of the licensee, primary jurisdictions of operations, and your principal representatives. Of course, this form is to be completed. If you're going to complete it, if you're going to do it by hand, it should be written in block capitals. Otherwise, it should be typed. There are also instructions listed out on the page, on the cover page in rows 63 to 70. Moving on to sheet 1301. This sheet will capture information about the industry sector that you operate in, the licensees, products and services, as well as your some information about your customers. So, for example, item 1, of course, industry sector. You should state which sector best describes your business activities, whether you're an accounting firm, attorney at law, banking, insurance, etc., etc. If none of those apply to you, if it's an other, you can specify it in item 1.2. Item 2 would ask the number of customers that you have at the end of the reporting period. Of course, the reporting period would be December 31st and the relevant year end. Item 2.2.1 will ask about the services, the number of customers, specifically in the services and products. So it's a very granular breakdown of your client base depending on the services and products that you offer. Here it will ask about the number of clients to whom only one service is provided. Item 2.2.3 will ask number of clients for whom more than one service is provided, and so on. Moving on to item 2.2.5. We will ask for the breakdown of services provided to customers, with the key indicator being whether the customer was incorporated in Jamaica or outside of Jamaica, and whether the customer is non-incorporated, still located in Jamaica, or outside of Jamaica. So that's all of this right here. Moving on to item 3. As I said before, we will ask some information about your customers. We of course ask whether or not due diligence was carried out, which is a requirement by the TCSP Act. If no due diligence was conducted, we will ask you to state the reason for not doing so in item 3.11. And then in item 3.3, we will ask for more details about your customers, about who are individuals who are residents of Jamaica, corporate entities, individuals who are not residents, and entities domiciled outside of Jamaica. And of course, we'll ask you a few more questions, but I think those are a little bit more straightforward. Wait, no, geographic areas, right? So we will also ask whether or not you have any clients/customers who are residents of FATF high-risk countries. Moving on. Item 4.3. This will be mandatory for everyone to complete, whether you're corporate services, trust, or both. This will be mandatory for those who have a December year end. So just keep that in mind. Item 4.3, it's mandatory for any licensee with a December year end. Moving on to sheet 13.02. Services provided to regulated entities. So we'll ask if you provide any services to regulated entities, and we'll also ask about unregulated activities by the licensees in this sheet. So for example, if any entity provides services to, say, an investment manager or administrator, a pensions investment manager or administrator, you just copy the tick here and you put it here, and you just indicate the number of entities that you provide said services to. If you don't provide any services to regulated entities, then you can just leave this blank. And as mentioned before, we will ask whether or not you provide any unregulated activities. So unregulated activities mean activities not regulated by the FSC. If you don't, no, that's good. If you do, yes, and just kindly list out the activities and the number of clients you provide said activities to. Moving on to sheet 1303. So financial resources. So we will ask about the source of revenue in the sheet, broken down by domestic currency and foreign currency, by the services, kind of similar to what we asked in 1301 about your clients, just about your revenue in this sheet. Then we also have a balance sheet summary here. So this is where you will put your balance sheet information about your licensees. This part is a little bit more straightforward. Contingent liabilities. Contingent liabilities. I will highlight this. So contingent liabilities is also defined in the guide to completing Form 13. It's item 8, page 9. Contingent liabilities refers to liabilities for which the amount and timing for settlement are uncertain and includes matters such as claims related to pending litigation and administrative penalties. Where applicable, the contingent liability should be quantified and any potential losses that could be incurred are to be summarized in item 8.1.1. If the licensee is unable to quantify a potential contingent liability it is aware of, this should also be disclosed. Moving on to sheet 1304. This sheet will ask about information relating to trusts. So if you're a corporate services provider only, you don't need to complete this sheet. If you are a trust services provider, you need to complete this sheet. So we will ask about the assets that are under trusteeship or or administration, which of course excludes the pension arrangements that are exempt under the TCSP Act. Again, we will ask for a breakdown of domestic currency and local currency. We also ask you to identify the types of assets that are held in trust, again, excluding the pensions arrangements, whether it's by cash, the amounts, treasury bills, etc., etc. We will also ask you to break down the number of trusts based on the assets held on the trust. So if you have, let's say 4 trusts that have up to just $1 million each in each trust, you just put the number of trusts in here and you list the combined total. You have trusts that exceeds 1 million but does not exceed 10 million. You put the number here and the cumulative figure here, and so on and so forth. Moving on to sheet 1305. Again, we're going to be asking about the directorship, secretaryship, and partnership of the licensee, your entities. Again, just asking about the structure of the management of your entities. So we're going to ask you the number of people who are acting as directors or alternate directors of a company, how many people are acting as secretaries or acting as partners of a firm. You answer the questions that are applicable to. So if there's no partners, of course, you put 0. And then, of course, in item 14, you put the name of the person and the position that said person holds. So if it's a director, let's say John Brown, you put director and John Brown. Of course, there is a little count at the very bottom. Moving on to section sheet 1306. This talks about governance matters revolving your entities. So we will ask questions such as if you have any board members, executives, or shareholders who are PEPs. Of course, PEPs meaning politically exposed persons. Total number of staff employed by you guys, how many engage in corporate services, how many engage in the provision of trust services. We asked whether or not your risk management policies, procedures, and controls are adequate and complied with. Again, as I mentioned, some of these questions have drop-down boxes. Asked whether or not there were any new risk identified in your risk register. We asked whether or not you've undertaken a risk management of the business during your reporting period. If not, we asked you to provide an explanation. We'll ask whether or not the risk assessment conducted has been reviewed internally by your board or senior management. We asked when was that most recent date. We also ask about your internal audit AML risk rating. So I believe most of you would be familiar that with the internal audit that there would be a section that speaks about the AML and CFT risks. Of course, there are inherent risks involved with the AML process. Your internal audit team would, of course, or even external audit team would provide a risk rating, and that's the rating that you should provide with the inherent risk. I'd just like to point out, by the way, even if some of these, even if some of the questions don't apply to you, we would appreciate if you could just respond to these questions with NA. So if, for example, right here, if you don't have a risk rating for distribution, we don't want you to leave it blank. If it doesn't apply to you, just put NA. And the same goes for every other sheet. So for example, if you moving on to sheet 1307. This sheet will address complaints, your complaints mechanism handling situation, whether there were any complaints lodged during the period under review, to categorize the nature of the complaints, right? Whether it's a complaint relating to advice given or complaints relating to the complaints handling process, or whether it's complaints related to accessibility of products or services or changes thereto said product and service information, just to provide a number here. We asked whether or not any complaints have been unresolved for a period in excess of 3 months. If yes, we ask you to provide details of why the complaint has remained unresolved for that period of time. We also ask you to break down the time frame for the number of complaints resolved. So if most of your complaints were resolved in less than 3 days, just state the number of complaints, and so on and so forth. Relatively straightforward. Moving on to sheet 1308. This is the interrogatory sheet. The sheet just contains additional interrogatories in connection with other regulations and stipulations set out by the TCSP Act and regulations. For example, we will ask about your PII, whether there have been any claims made against it, to provide details. Of course, we ask whether or not it's adequate. We ask the date of the last assessment of the PII. And we ask whether or not it's up to date or not. We also ask about your record management system and the maintenance of registers in the sheet as well. So we also asked about your business continuity planning, whether you had to activate it or not. If yes, again, provide details here. If no, just put NA in this section. Again, we ask whether or not you've maintained your records in accordance with Section 16 of the TCSP Act. We ask if you kept records in accordance with Regulation 8 of the TCSP regulations. We ask where you keep your records, like this physical address of the country or territory. And we ask whether or not you have any outsourcing arrangements. If you have outsourcing arrangements, we ask you to provide the details in section 35(1) here. We also ask if you have all your agreements in writing. And we ask if you ever reported any suspicious activities during the reporting period. Moving on to sheet 1309. So going back to the supporting documents. So the sheet 1309 is just a checklist. So we just ask that you indicate which supporting documents have been included with the submission of this report. So if organizational chart, you just tick yes. The insurance policy, the PI, of course, and the risk assessment of armed reports. You just copy the tick and just paste where applicable. Sheet 1310, the declaration sheet. So it's just, as it says, self-explanatory. It just indicate whether or not the information is accurate and then it's been conducted in accordance with the TCSP Act, any relevant guidelines issued by the FSC, any directions issued by the FSC. So, for example, if we have had correspondence with you to address certain things and you don't follow it, you'd say no, or it's not applicable. Or if you follow the instructions, you tick yes, of course. And of course, the principal representative signs the bottom of this page. Of course, moving on to the last sheet, sheet 1311, the validation sheet. This sheet, you don't need to do anything to it at all. It's not to be completed by you guys. It is literally used to just verify and check that certain things or certain conditions and figures are met and are consistent or valid. So, for example, first question, total number of customers across all services and products, both domestic and foreign, at the end of the reporting period does not exceed the number of customers. So it will do a check with certain things.
Now, that is for completion by the FSC, that's what you're saying?
No, it's
Last week.
automated, of course. I was just gonna do a
Automated.
demonstration.
So we're not entering anything on.
No, no, not at all.
Okay.
So this is the easiest sheet of all of them.
Okay.
Yes. So let us say you said you have 3 customers here. Right, so for example, I have put that you, the licensee had 3 customers for the year, but they didn't fill out the other necessary, cells in the sheet. It'll come back as false. So in other words, you guys can also use this sheet in order to sort of like fact check your own, information, if you will. It can be used as a guide. And that's the walkthrough of Form 13, otherwise known as the AIR. Going back to presentation. Questions? Please don't ask me hard questions. You can also post your questions in the chat if you like. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I've been notified that the chat has still been disabled, so if you would like to ask any questions, please feel free.
Hi, Sean. I just wanted to know.
While you think
When-
of your questions,
Okay.
if you have any, just reminding you that the session has been recorded and it will be posted to our website as well. So you could always go back and check it. Especially for persons who just joined, you can access not just, well, this one isn't there as yet. We hope to get the recording of this session up as quickly as possible. But the first session has already been posted. So and let me can you just remind me of the link, Sean, since we put it, we're gonna post a link in the chat as well for you to access the form. But generally speaking, you go to the website and you go to the tab, click on media, and then you see a bunch of things. You select videos and click on video, and then click on video, and then that's it. Yeah. Again, I mean, we apologize for the event this morning, and so just to let you know, for the third webinar and any other such activity that we're going to have in the future, this is going to become a requirement. You have to not just log on, but you also when you have to put where you're from. So it's a control mechanism really. So we thank you for understanding that. Chat is enabled. Yeah, the chat is enabled now again. So if you have any questions, I know. So and even if you don't have the questions now, that's fine. You can always just drop it's an email, rcts@fscjamaica.org, and we'll answer, because I know that you may need time to go through the form and play around with it yourself before you ask any burning questions. So you could just drop us an email or call us, and we'll be so glad to assist you.
Hi, good morning. Alicia Thompson from MFNG Asset Management.
So if it's now 11 a.m. If there's another question?
You're not hearing me?
Sorry?
Hello?
Oh, hi.
Morning?
Hi,
Hello,
Alicia.
morning?
Hi, yeah, we're hearing you. You have a question?
Yes, my question is, could you, I don't know if you could go back over the area on risk rating with the internal auditor, just for clarity?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
You spoke to risk rating.
Right.
an internal audit. I'm just asking for you to
Go back to that section.
explain, yes, and explain, is it that you
No.
need the auditors to present?
No, so. Yeah, sorry, so. Hello?
Yes, I'm hearing you. I'm
Yeah,
hearing you,
I'm
Mr.
saying-
Shinsi.
Oh, sorry, I was muted, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so we're saying it doesn't, Sean, because sometimes you get your internal auditor to do that work, but it doesn't have to be you. I mean, you have a risk management department or unit or so somebody's there to do it. So it doesn't have to be internal audit. You just use, but sometimes intern people, especially small organizations, may ask their internal auditors to do that. But it doesn't have to be them. It's just whatever kind of risk assessment you do, because you know, you ought to document it. You know, so that's what we're saying. It does not, it says not, it's not necessary, it doesn't have to be done by the internal auditor.
Okay, noted.
Hi, morning, Mr. Liu.
Yeah,
Are you hearing me?
yes.
Hello.
Hi, quick question regarding the validation sheet, particularly question 5 in the validation sheet. It says the total number of individuals. Well, you can see it. So our issue is that when we do our CDDs, some individuals are also PEPs. So when we count them as one, as a PEP, as an individual who's a resident of Jamaica, and as a PEP. So when we filled out 13.01, we
Yes.
classified the individual as a PEP as well as a individual who's a resident in Jamaica. So when we use the validation sheet, it will always come up as false because it will never match the the CDD that were conducted since we count them as one. So what can be done to resolve that?
Oh, thanks for pointing that out, Graham. We look into that, how we can, you know, improve on the sheet. But in the meantime, what you could do, you could just explain. You always, when you submit the report, you always have the freedom, so to speak, to provide any information that you think necessary. But we're going to look in what you say and see if we can account for that. But in the meantime, if you have to submit the form before it is fixed, then you just put a note somewhere, or even a piece of a blank sheet of paper or something. Just explain, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Why is that? Now, talking on that matter, and this is the thing now. Once the form, we roll out these forms, it is new, and just like how you pointed out that to us, Graham, we will look into it and try to improve on the form as we go along. So there may be changes to the form based off the feedback, you know, because it's all well and good when you have the nice pretty forms and things, anything, but when you start to use it now and you realize that's what we want persons to, when you start use it, having the challenges, let us know so we can, you know, improve upon it. So don't take this as a very final form as yet. For now it is, but from time to time we may need to tweak it. You know, because at the end of the day, we want it to be easier for you and easier for ourselves. Less work for us to the FSC. But so just bear that in mind.
Okay, that's Mr. Shinsi.
Just to add to Philip, you know, there are going to be times where you need to provide relevant supporting documents. Of course, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, you should compile an appendix of all the supporting documents and submit it along with the report. So even though this is a validation sheet. I did say to use it as a guide. It isn't gospel, of course. So just because something comes up as false doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, of course. If there's a valid explanation, you could, of course, provide it to us, and it will be up to us to look at the information.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm not hearing you, Mr. Chensi. I think you're on mute. Hello? We're not hearing Mr. Chensi. You're on mute.
Oh dear, I keep doing that. Sorry,
Yeah.
I really wanted to just thank you again for attending. Thank everyone for
Oh.
attending. And you know, again, we apologize for the late start. So look out for notification in terms of the final webinar with the audit financial statements. But in the meantime, I just want to reiterate that you can always reach out to us. Pretty much we're the three persons who deal with the day-to-day activity for TCSP for the time being. So, and we know, and I can't stress this enough, we know that it's relatively a new regime, regulatory regime, that is, because you know, you people had been, some of you have been doing this thing from some time before the legislation came into force. So we know some things are going to take some time and so on, but we just need to just keep the communication lines open, and we'll try our best to do to try to serve you as much as possible. All right, so it is now 11:07. So let me wish you good rest of the day and see you in October. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chinsi and team. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Have a good day all.
Oh, Julie.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'll respond to you. I promise from yesterday, but I'll respond to you as soon as this session is over. I'll send you that information that we spoke about earlier.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And Mr. Chinsi, notification on the extension of the date as well?
Sorry?
We'll get notification on the extension of the date?
But actually it's November 30th, so I will tell you it's November 30th. I mean, if you...
For December.
Oh.
Sorry. For the 20, you're talking about the
Right.
the ARR and the compliance report, December 2023 information, right? I'm
Correct.
saying that we're extending that to November 30th,
Correct.
2024 for submission.
Correct. I was just wondering if we should look out for notification on the same.
All right, but they're notified, no, but okay, I'll send you a notification. I know, we'll send you a notification to you.
No problem.
Yes. All right, boy. All right.
Thank you again, everyone. Take care.
Thanks to Sean. Bye-bye.